Where could you meet the love of your life? At school? At work? On vacation? Or just while you're waiting for the train one day? Ask any couple, and they will tell you the story of how they met and decided to spend the rest of their lives together. The stories are often simple, but sometimes they are extraordinary.
Okay, so we met in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt when was it? October last year. We are both from the same place, here, Birmingham in England, but we never knew each other before, and we've been back since to Sharm el-Sheikh.
My son started playing with your son on holiday, and it sort of developed from there, really.
We met at a wedding in France, a mutual friend's wedding.
In Cannes, to be precise. Mm-hmm. It was a lovely wedding, yeah. She was a bridesmaid and I was one of the guests, and we hit it off.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up together?
We hit it off at the wedding.
We were put at the same table.
We put at the same table. We got on very well. It was a 3-day wedding, so we got to know each other very well over those 3 days. She's from Boston in the States, so she went back there. I went back to London, where I'm from here. And we sort of had an online relationship, didn't we? And then Skype yeah. For a couple of months. And then she came to London to do her MBA. And we spent about a year together in London, and now...
Year and a half.
Mm-hmm. And now we're in Boston living together.
Mm-hmm.
We met in a bar in London, and I was on a night out after work on a Friday night with a friend of mine, and we got talking.
Right, yeah, I was actually, at the time I was doing an internship in Italy, but I went on a city break in London for about 10 days, so I went with a couple of my girlfriends, and we were just hanging out, and we saw each other, I think, pretty early on, but then he eventually, maybe like an hour later or so, came up to talk, and things kind of went from there.
But in an increasingly busy world, you sometimes struggle to meet new people. And occasionally it takes something a little out of the ordinary to bring two people together. This is Olivia and James. They recently got engaged, and they're planning their wedding, which will take place in Scotland next year. Olivia and James's love story had quite an unconventional beginning.
I put myself forward for a blind date in a magazine, in a national newspaper, and 9 months later, I got an email saying, "We found somebody, would you like to go out for dinner and meet this mystery person?" So that's how I met James, was turning up to a restaurant and seeing him for the first time.
I also wrote into the magazine, and 2 days later they contacted me and said, "Actually, I know we said we wouldn't find anyone, but we have found someone. Would you be interested in going on a blind date?" To which I obviously said yes. And about a month later, we met at the restaurant. I was told Olivia's name, and I was told what she did, how old she was, and a few interests, and that was it.
Yeah, it was the same, and they told me that James was interested in architecture, writing, and theatre, I think. Oh, yeah. Sailing. Yeah, 3 things. So.
Yeah, and I remember you were interested in the arts, I think, and also architecture. I think that's where they connected us.
The very first time James and Olivia met was at a restaurant booked by the Guardian newspaper. Today, what do they remember about that dinner?
Well, that evening was very memorable. We talked about all kinds of different things. We talked about sailing and how we'd done the same run a few weeks earlier before we'd met.
There were lots of things, but the most remarkable thing was just how long we talked. It was sort of non-stop for about 4 hours until the restaurant closed.
Even before they had written the feedback for the newspaper article, Olivia and James knew that they wanted to see each other again.
after the date, I got a text from James the next day, which is perfect timing. And it was a really lovely text saying what a lovely evening he'd had, and it was very nice to meet me. So I immediately replied and said, brilliant, let's meet up next week. And so we arranged a time to meet up.
And did they discuss what they were writing about each other for the newspaper article?
No, we didn't know what each other had written about the other one, so that was quite exciting. And by that point, we had gone out for dinner a couple of times, and so we knew each other, but we had made a point of not telling the other one what we'd written.
So Olivia and James became a couple. And 2 years on, what is it that makes their relationship work?
Oh, that's a good question. I think what makes our relationship work is, well, we've both got a good sense of humour, and I think James is hilarious. So I'm laughing a lot all the time.
That is very important, humour, I think.
Yeah.
Not just general laughing, but being able to diffuse moments with humour is very important. And if you don't share a sense of humour, it's hard to do that.
But I think also our interests are ever so slightly different. So things that James says, are his interests, I used to claim were my interests and then realised I never found the time for them, things like going to the theatre. And so when I met James, those were the things that we did together, and it was brilliant because I was suddenly finding the time to do the things I claimed I liked doing, but never quite managed to squeeze in.
And the relationship works so well that they've decided to spend the rest of their lives together.
We had known each other for just over 2 years when I proposed. Yep. About 2 years and 2 months, I think. I had planned to propose at Christmas time because I knew Olivia would be with her family then, and I thought that would be a good time. And also her family live in Scotland, in a very pretty part of Scotland, and I thought it was quite near the sea. I thought I could propose on the beach. I thought that sounded like a good plan. But then I decided, no, it's now. I'm going to propose now, or at least the coming weekend. We were going to the theatre to see a play, and it's the National Theatre, which is quite a cool building. And I thought I could propose somewhere in the theatre. So we then arrived at the theatre. Olivia said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to lunch. I'm very hungry."
I had been promised lunch before the play, and then there was this change of plan, and I got really grumpy.
I said, "Why don't we just go on a tour?"
Because we don't have time.
It'll be brilliant. It'll be a great, they're really good. It'll be really short. He said, "No, it won't." I went, "Come on, it'll be brilliant." And so Olivia stood there with her arms crossed whilst I waited for the lady to arrive to take us.
Yeah.
She took us straight to the biggest stage at the National. There are 3 stages, and the biggest is the Olivier stage. We needed something to prompt us, and so she said, "Well, you have the audience of the Olivier here. Is there anything you'd like to say to the audience?" And Olivia laughed, and I said, "Well, actually, Olivia, come and sit with me on the chair." On the 2 chairs. And she said, "Oh no, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "I've actually been planning this all week." And she said, "Planning what?" And at that point, I sort of slid off my chair and onto my knee and asked her to marry me. She sort of gasped and said, "Yes," and grabbed me. And a big hug.
And the news of their engagement didn't just thrill their family and friends.
The girl who set us up, she was lovely. And she was lovely, as things worked out. We stayed in touch with her, and, we told her quite quickly when we got engaged, because she'd been doing that job for quite a number of years, and we were the first couple she'd set up to get married. So
apparently when I sent the email or text or whatever it was, she stood up in the middle of their open plan office and put her hands above her head and said, We've got a blind date wedding. So it meant a lot to her, I think.
Yeah.